Welcome to Illuminate Property Perth Property Update for 2012. Before I get started, I just want to share with you the whole notion of a good market or a bad market. I hear lots of stories of people getting caught up with, I guess, how bad the market is and not actually taking any action because of that. Now, I'm here to tell you that it really doesn't matter what's happening in the market. There is money that can be made in an upward trend market, and there's money that can be made in a downward trend market. Obviously, though, with different markets, you need to look at different strategies and also need to work out what you're actually investing for. Are you after cash flow or are you after capital growth? Because depending on that will determine what type of strategy you are going to use. Now, just because the overall market might be trending a certain way doesn't necessarily mean that a suburb is trending that way. So it's really important that you start at a macro level when investing in property and look at the market as a whole, and then start looking at it in a micro level where we zone in on certain suburbs that we're going to focus on for a certain strategy. So there's no such thing as a good market or a bad market. Markets can go up, can go down, and sometimes can flatline. It's only a good or a bad deal. So it all comes down to the numbers, and it's all about number crunching to see what type of deal is going to suit you. A deal that may suit me may not suit someone else due to their risk portfolio, or also because of their outcome, so what they're actually purchasing the property for. Now, before you get started, like I said, you must know why you're investing. It's like heading off on a trip and not knowing your destination, and then not looking in the roadmap to work out how to get there. So it's really important that you do have goals and you do have a plan, but most importantly, you need to realize, am I investing for capital growth or am I investing for cash flow? Some people will focus on different areas. Personally, I look at both. So I look at strategies that are going to help me with my cash flow as well as my capital growth. So the Perth property market, well, what's happening overall is that house sales are up again. So it's great for agents. They're keeping extremely busy, and they're also making money on commissions. So it's been a long time coming for them, and they're quite happy. If you're an investor, it's also great news because you're able to offload some of the properties that you may be holding on to at a reasonable price and within a reasonable amount of time. Medium house price currently sitting at $457,000. REWA does suggest that they may actually increase that to the $470,000 mark. So we're seeing a steady increase across all sectors of the market except for the top end. So when we're talking top end properties, we're talking, say, the $800,000 plus price bracket. That seems to have been flatlining for quite some time now in Perth, and doesn't seem to be moving just yet. Generally what we find is there's a flow-on effect. So what we are seeing though is that cheaper homes or first home buyer sector of the market has been moving, which is really encouraging, and that's then passed on to the trade-up buyers. So trade-up buyers have been selling their homes and moving into more expensive suburbs, and the next point will be then the top end moving. So we will see that transition, but we could be a few months, maybe a year away before we actually see that occur. So Perth overall has seen a 25% increase in land sales. What I'm finding as a developer is that land stocks are quite low. Which means that because they're low, the demand for them is quite high and people are snapping them up. Developers are still finding it hard for finance, which means that there isn't going to be an influx of supply coming onto the market in the next few months. So we've seen an increase in prices, which is great for developers. There seems to be overall a very stable and balanced market. One of the key points, one of the biggest changes that we have also seen in the Perth market is the decrease in stock levels. So it all comes down to supply and demand, and presently our demand for properties is quite high while the actual stock levels is extremely low. So last year in April, we were at 18,000 properties on the market, and currently we've dropped to under 11,000, which means that there's less choice for buyers, and it also starts to brew a little bit of competition. And we're seeing that properties that are priced correctly are getting snapped up straight away, and in some areas are actually getting snapped up above the asking price. So we're moving now from a buyer's market, it seems, into a seller's market. Okay, so here's a graph, and this has been provided by REWA, and it shows us the sales volume and the median price across Perth. So you can see the sales volume has actually increased, and you can see the median price, although it looks quite flat, like it hasn't had an increase, it actually has had an increase in the last quarter. So that's a good sign as well. Here we have the Perth land sales prices. Again, let's look at the sales volume that has increased, and we've also seen that the median price has also increased, and that is due to the decreased number of stock. So because there's a decreased number of stock actually being released onto the market, we're seeing the pressure on that, and people are snapping them up and actually paying more for these properties. Perth listing and average selling days. Now this is important when you're looking at purchasing a property and you want to sell it quickly in order to generate some cash flow. It's really important to calculate how long you're going to have to hold this property for and calculate the interest required. So this is why we look at this, and it's also an indication of how the market's actually tracking. So you can see the days are decreasing. And you can also see that the listings are also decreasing. So as the listings are decreasing, we're finding that the average selling days are also decreasing. Now the rental vacancy and the rental market in general, what we've seen has been quite amazing actually. Over probably the last 9 months, we've seen a real increase in rental prices, and again we've seen another increase in rental prices. It just seems that we don't have enough rental properties on the market, and you can see the vacancy rate has actually decreased. It did have a slight increase over the last few months. However, we're still finding that prices are increasing quite significantly, with the median rent now being at $430 per week. So we've seen a 2.4% change in the last 3 months in Perth. So a strategy that you may consider to use in today's market to generate cash flow and or capital growth, I believe, is buying off the plan. And buying off the plan is all about market momentum. It's about buying under market value and holding for a period of time. Now when you buy off the plan, you're actually buying a concept or an idea. And generally we're looking at 12 to 18 months, depending on the development, of when that property will be titled. Once it's titled, then obviously you settle. So it's a great time to buy when the market looks like it's going to be trending upwards, because you get the momentum behind it. Now it's really important though when you buy something, and my number one rule for investing is to make sure you don't lose money on day one. You want to create some type of equity when you buy, is to make sure that you compare what's available now on the market. So for example, say if you were looking at a high-rise building and you were looking at buying a unit in a complex, I would encourage you to go and see what other complexes are around in the same suburb and how much they're actually fetching. So compare apples to apples. You need to also negotiate hard, and I do teach people how to negotiate different negotiating strategies that you could use to ensure that you do get a great deal. But negotiate hard, try and include as much as you can into your contract. Generally I encourage people to look at the first stage of any release or the last stage, and that's because developers generally need to move the first stage quite quickly in order to get their construction loan in place. So at times you'll find that they will discount the first stage in order to get their pre-sale requirement so they can start construction. At the last stage of a development, generally a developer is now focused on their next project, so that's when some great buys can be had. So generally the first or last stage of any development, you want to work with someone who's credible, so credible builder or developer. Have a look at previous work that they have completed. And don't buy where there's mass supply. So don't go into high-rise buildings. Look for quite boutique or scarce product that's on the market. Get contracts overseen by a property lawyer. Now this is really important. There are things such as sunset clauses which enable developers to get out of contracts, so it's really important that if you are going to be investing in an off the plan, you want to make sure that the contract is watertight and allows you the flexibility and not the developer. Check settlement dates is important again, because if they tell you settlement's going to be 12 months, you obviously need to plan for that to ensure that you have the funds ready in 12 months time. So understand when the title should be issued, and also understand how that's going to affect in your overall investment strategies. Low deposits generally is what's required for buying off the plan, which is why it's one of my favourite strategies, because you can have control over the asset with very little money down. You can also on-sell or revalue at settlement. So one thing that I have done in the past is actually on-sold the property prior to the title being issued, and then have a simultaneous settlement. So a settlement occur at the same time as to when I was due to purchase it. Or if you want to actually keep it and hold it in your portfolio as a buy and hold strategy, you can definitely do that. And if you've bought really well, then you can go to the bank, get it revalued, and draw out the equity of that property. So to you all, to your success, knowledge is key. However, without power, it is useless.
For more information about how you can create wealth through property investing, subscribe to my YouTube channel or visit my website at www.illuminateproperty.com.au. Property investing is the easiest and safest way to build long-term wealth. Anyone can do it, and there are always fantastic opportunities no matter what is happening in the market. If you want to find out more or start on your journey to wealth creation, then click the link in the description below and join me on a lifetime of wealth through property.